Hello, Professor Keeley. This video is to report on my internship for the fall 2012 that I did with Clearfield City. I did an internship to find out I did a research study on the disproportionate fees that they charge for business licenses, and more specifically for rental properties. So I sent you an email, and in the email I sent you the fee study presentation and the PowerPoint that I gave to the City Council and the Mayor and the City Executive. I also sent you the statistics that I've got from the data in an Excel spreadsheet. And then I sent you an executive summary, which is the same thing, just summarized in a Word document that the City Council could review. And then I also sent you the recommended fees. So basically, the whole purpose of this study was to make recommendations on the fees and what they charge, and these were my recommendations. So I don't know if you need all that, but I thought I'd send it all in case that helped in your evaluation of me during this project. So I think really quickly I'll try and go over the presentation similar to what I did in the City Council, but in only a few minutes, so you get an idea of what I did, and then give you some thoughts on what I thought of the internship. So really quickly, the City of Clearfield, like most cities, they charge a business license for rental properties, and like a lot of cities, they charge, or they are liking to charge, based on how big of a burden that property is toward the city. And the biggest burden, it seems, is through police calls for service for the police department. And so to classify these properties, they've done it by units. And so the city currently has single rental properties, meaning one unit, and then duplex properties, and then 3+ properties. So complexes that have 3 apartment pluses are charged a different rate than single home rentals, and that price has been largely based on the amount of calls for service they get from the police department. And so a few years ago, a study was done by a third-party company. They paid quite a bit of money for this study to kind of find out what some of these numbers were. They used data from 2006 to 2009, found out how many calls for service, tried to guess to the best of their ability what the cost was for that. And they come up with a cost of $138.66 per call. So on average, that's what it costs the city for the police department to respond to a call for service at a property. So I was asked to update this study and make any new recommendations for it. So I took all the raw data that was given to me from the police department in calls for service and started going through thousands and thousands of calls. I think there was about 16,000 calls made in that few-year span. And as you can see, I crunched those numbers, did all statistical data, and come up with some new numbers. I don't have time to go through those numbers with you if I want to keep this under 10 minutes, but you can see there were some statistical patterns, and that the calls for service had gone down in both owner-occupied and rental. But some interesting information as I was doing my study that I thought was, one, that overall calls for service are dropping, and I came up with some possibilities that weren't necessarily just because of less crime or less health problems or that sort of thing. For instance, they got a grant through the police department for a task force for gang-related activities, and then they've made a separate category for just gang-related calls, which wouldn't be included in the data. And then they also dedicated two new full-time officers for traffic, and that information also would probably affect the data, because now traffic violations have gone up in the city, which we only used calls for service that could be directly related to a property or attached to a parcel ID. So there are some reasons why those numbers could have gone down. But I also thought it was interesting, as you can see, there was a larger portion that I thought was being left out I mean, the whole purpose of this study was to find out who was responsible for the higher burden on the city and charge them an appropriate fee to try and regain that. And what I found was that the second largest sample size, other than single-family units, were 3 and 4 plexes, which were being grouped in with the other properties. There was 475 single dwelling rentals in Clearfield, 83 and 4plex. The next biggest were duplex at 50, and multifamily, which would be 5 plus 29 units. So I thought just because of the sample size, it was statistically significant to add another classification of 3 and 4plexes. Also, if you took that classification out and did the old numbers for them, they're actually the very highest calls for service. And some of the guesses on that is, one, after you get to 3 and 4 complexes at least, it seems like there's a different market for that sort of thing. They're usually a lower rent, so a lower income family can afford that type of unit. But on the other hand, at 3 and 4 units, most of them were privately owned and privately operated, so they didn't have the operations and the capabilities that some of the large complexes had in their professional management and that sort of thing. So that could be a reason why you're still getting the same clientele without the same professional management in those complexes. So my recommendations, I basically just made new recommendations on the prices for the new numbers from the update of the information that I was given, and then I also suggested a new classification for their business licenses with that 3 to 4 complex. And the city council actually adopted all of my fees and adopted the new classification. So it was interesting to see this internship happen. You know, that something that I'd done was actually affecting the city's budget by thousands and thousands of dollars. So it wasn't just something to keep the grad student busy. It was something that I believe really was helping the city, which I appreciated. I also was supposed to look at the effectiveness of the Good Landlord program, which is another interesting topic I found in city administration, because they absolutely ineffective. Because the program is absolutely ineffective at this point, I think there's some other problems that could be with that. That maybe there was a huge drop off from when the program started to when it wasn't started. We don't have a lot of numbers from before the program started, but since the program has started, there has been absolutely no drop in calls for service to the properties that are on the Good Landlord program. So that was more information they wanted me to get. So really quickly, just to go over, I absolutely loved this internship. I worked with Adam Leonard, the city manager, and mostly with J.J. Allen, the assistant city manager. And they were absolutely wonderful. They included me on a lot of stuff that I don't think they necessarily needed to include me on, like executive staff meetings. Every week I went to the executive staff meeting, which had all of the department heads, public works, the mayor was there, parks and rec, the city administration, police department, and I got to work with all of these department heads and got to know a lot of good people. So, you know, I mean, all the city administration, the parks and rec head, the public works head, the police department, they all know me by name, and through my internship I got to work with every one of them individually. So I appreciated that, and like I say, just the trust that they placed in me, that this was a real project that they really needed done, that was going to affect the city in large ways. And they let me do the presentation to the city council that I got to know very well. And overall, it was a wonderful experience. I think they were happy with the results. It saved them thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars compared to having a third party update that study. And I got to know a lot of good people. JJ's now written me a lot of letters of recommendation as I've been applying for full-time employment. So overall, absolutely love the internship, and hopefully this video helps. Please email me if there's something I'm missing or something I could update you on in what I did. And anyway, thanks so much for everything you've done. It was a great program, and absolutely love my experience at SUU. So we will talk to you later. Bye.